build back the Viet Cong from what it had, the devastating defeat at Tet. But, and this was always difficult for my students to understand and appreciate, even though the Tet Offensive was a tactical defeat for the enemy, it was a strategic victory because it changed American public opinion at home, trust in the government, trust in what our leaders were telling us, especially President Lyndon Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, dropped, and people no longer believed the news that they were getting about the war. And because they couldn't believe the news, they couldn't trust the news, they began withdrawing their support of the Vietnam War, and that led to the policy of what we call Vietnamization. You know, from Tet on, the U.S. is trying to figure out how the hell do we get out of this war? How do we get out of the war without having it look like we are being defeated? And that was Henry Kissinger's whole goal. Getting out of the war without appearing to lose it is pulling a rabbit out of a hat. You know, it really couldn't be done. But it took 5 more years to figure out a way to do that. And so, getting back to Hue, the biggest battle takes place right here. This is the Tet holiday is the major holiday in Vietnam. It's a week-long celebration. You go back to your ancestral village, your family villages, and you bring food and you bring clothing, and and the whole country's on the move. You never visit during Tet because the whole country's on the move. Is completely insane. But the enemy used Tet as a cover to have people dressed in civilian clothes. They were really bringing not food but weapons and supplies. And when the order was given on January 31st, 1968, with I think a mortar attack, firing off mortars just outside the city, that was the signal to the NVA and the Viet Cong to rise up and take both sides, the whole city, and they did. Just about the whole city. They took the Citadel here. They took most of the new city across where we just came from, and there were a few small holdouts. One of the holdouts, which we'll see, was the airport within the Citadels, the small airport that was being held by the 1st ARVN Infantry Division. There was one or two companies of the division. They happened to be some of the ARVN's, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam's best soldiers. And these just 400 or 500 ARVN soldiers managed to hold off the attack in one corner of the Citadel. On the new side of the river, the Perfume River, which we just came from, was MACV headquarters, which was located somewhat near our hotel. And again, this was just 200 American advisors, Marines, Army, advising ARVN. Hue was not a city where combat was supposed to take place. Both sides had kind of tacitly agreed, don't touch Hue. It's the spiritual capital. There had not been fighting here. It was very lightly defended. The Viet Cong and NVA had never attacked the city before. So this was completely unexpected. And the NVA and Viet Cong knew that it would be a dramatic thing to take over the spiritual capital. So because of that, it was very lightly defended, and MACV headquarters, again, managed to hold off, and they quickly called for reinforcements. 2 companies of Marines, a grand total of 400, 500 Marines, came down from Phu Bai, from the 5th Marine Regiment, from just where we came, the very route that we came down, the very place that we came down. We arrived at Phu Bai Air Base last night, drove up Highway 1. These Marines drove up Highway 1 to protect MACV headquarters. That's how they understood it. They understood that there may have been several hundred enemy attacking MACV headquarters. They came to police it up. They had no idea that there were 10 to 15,000, 16,000 enemy troops here in Hue. So you have 400 or 500 Marines against 10 to 15,000 enemy. They had no idea what they were getting into. They fought their way toward MACV headquarters, and then they fought their way over the bridge that we just came over. while they're coming up, we've had a few of these Marines join our events and describe the battle. As they're crossing the bridge, they're being fired upon, and they realize, oh, the NVA is trying to destroy the bridge while they're on the bridge. Can you imagine that? They fought their way, the bridge was destroyed, but they fought their way into the old city, and they began fighting. They began fighting just on the outskirts of the wall that we'll see. They immediately saw there's no way they're going to survive this. They are evacuated out of the old city back to the new, and they began fighting in the new city, door to door, room to room, house to house, the most brutal kind of urban warfare that they had not been trained to fight. It was civilians living, being massacred. The body count is still a matter of debate today. We know that by the end of the month, 1,000 Marines killed and wounded, mostly wounded. Enemy casualties, 5,000 or 6,000 maybe, just here in Way. Civilian casualties killed, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 men, women, and children. In the year and a half after the battle, about 5,000 corpses were found executed in shallow graves. This is very much it remains very controversial, and how many there were executions of Vietnamese civilians here in Way. How many were executed? Why they were executed, how they were selected. This is all matter of contention. I'm sure that the Vietnamese side is a very different accounting of this than the dominant American point of view. But the American point of view, the American investigations concluded that the Viet Cong, which were much more radical communists, much, much more than the NVA. The NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, they were a national army. The Viet Cong were highly ideological, committed communists, and they tended to be very radical. The NVA were not. They were fighting for their country as they saw it. The Viet Cong took over the political operation during the Battle of Hue City. And they immediately did something that the NVA didn't like. They started dragging civilians out that were on their list, their enemies list. They had collaborated with the U.S. They were working part-time for the U.S. They were maybe in the government, in the local government here. They were considered enemies of the movement, enemies of the revolution. And they were dragged out and they were executed, sometimes just in the street. Thousands of them were taken to remote jungles, executed there, buried alive. A lot of evidence of that in shallow graves. Graves were found as late as 1970 around here, and so there's a lot of speculation and a lot of mystery about exactly how many were killed and why they were selected. But that's one of the grim kind of legacies of the Battle of Hue. So as we're looking, we'll be seeing a lot of battleground of this, remarkable event.
We're inside that wall. Is that right?
Yes, we are. Yes. Yeah, this is a gigantic fortress meant to protect the emperor. I mean, these walls, 1.5 miles this way, 1.5 miles this way, 1.5 miles this way, about 3 miles square. So it's a gigantic, densely packed urban neighborhood within citadel walls. And then there's a citadel within the citadel, the Imperial Palace, which we will also see.
To put in perspective, they were 84,000